Hi, my name is Nikki. Welcome to Nightly Haven. This is where I just like to talk about whatever I'm into that day. I like paranormal stuff, mysteries, just anything that kind of intrigues me. That's something that you're into. Subscribe, like, share. So, right now, I've really been intrigued with this whole doppelganger thing. It definitely piques my interest because I've had a few encounters myself and just other people's encounters. It's just really weird. Growing up, I had a doppelganger. I never got to meet them. All through high school, friends would come up to me and be like, "Hey, I saw you in town," and I'm like, "No, you didn't. I wasn't there." Or they say they go up to him and then realize it wasn't me. But it's happened a few times through the years, even after I left and came back and went to a different town close to. I don't know if it was the same person that looks like me, but they say everyone has like a doppelganger. And whether it's genetic or if there's like some kind of supernatural thing to it, I'm not sure. But I just like to go over my stories and a couple of Reddit stories that I've seen that were kind of interesting, and I thought we can go through them together. So I think the first time that really stuck with me that I now think was like possibly a mimic was when I was like really little. I was probably maybe 4. I was standing in my living room and I heard a voice calling me. It sounded like from the back of the trailer, and it was like, "Nikki," and I kind of stopped and stood there and like listened, and I didn't follow it because there was just some kind of like weird, like, that's not right. That doesn't sound like the normal thing. And my dad was like, "Oh, you probably heard your aunt." But it was definitely not my aunt. It was kind of like a female kind of sing-song voice, spooky sing-song voice, like, "Nikki." It sounded like it was coming back from the hallway. So I was like, I'm not going back there. I was really creeped out, and I didn't know if it was my head or if it was actually something I heard. And I heard it again, and I just like stood there forever until the ease lifted and I was able to go again. But still to this day, I don't know what it was. So, was it a mimic or spirit or a little girl's overactive imagination? The second one, I was probably 13 or 14. I lived in the country, Northeast PA, and we had a family video store. And one of my childhood best friends lived up the street from us. And I was always at her house, and we were pretty inseparable. So on this day we were hanging out, her mom's friend brought over a Ouija board, and we lit some candles, and we started on this Ouija board, and we got a name. It said his name was Chris, and supposedly he had died in the lake down the street from us. Some boys had drowned him over a girl, apparently, and it was kind of creepy. And then the candles blew out, which was really weird because all the windows closed. So that like really creeped us out, and we're like, no, we're good. We just kind of shut everything down and we left. But like we definitely did not close that right, because after that my friend would tell me how it would say it would call her name. We'll just say my friend's name's Casey. So you'd be like, "Casey, get up for school," and she would get up and she realized it was a Saturday. Or she would hear her mom's name and she'd realize that she was the only one in the house. No one was there. And one time she was in the bathroom and something was like shaking her closet where she kept the toilet paper and the towels and stuff. Something was like trying to get out, and it would like mimic her mom's voice and stuff. Or you just see someone. When I was in high school, I lived in PA and my mom lived in Ohio, and she said she thought she seen me walk across the kitchen or dining room in my gown, and she swore it was me, but I was 500 miles away. I just love reading those like creepy Reddit stories and stuff. And it's like, how much of this is true? How much of it is imagination? Or how much of it is like made up? So, unauthorized said, I can only assume what myself and my mom encountered was a doppelganger. Before I start, my dad used to work at night. Anyways, when I was around 6 or 7, I lived in a townhouse with my mom and dad, up until my mom passed away less than a couple months later. And she was pouring me some milk in the kitchen like every other night, and I was standing and winding down for school the next day. There was nothing scary about this night, and I was just waiting for my mom to pour milk and looking out into our living room in front of me, looking at things and just waiting. However, on one of my head swivels from looking around, my dad had appeared in front of a closet door in our living room. It didn't scare me at first, since I just assumed it was my dad, but looking back, there was no noise ever made. Our doors and floors creaked, and with how quiet it was, you would have heard anyone moving around. However, what was so scary about it was my dad was just standing there and staring at us across the room. It wasn't scary at first, since I was still under the impression this was my dad, but no longer he kept standing there and staring at me, the scarier it got. He didn't move an inch. He didn't blink. And the longer I kept looking him in the eyes, his eyes were way too small. They were wide, but small enough to where it looked wrong. I remembered I started to blink and rub my eyes because I thought maybe I was seeing things, but it just kept standing there for a good minute longer until after I blinked and it just disappeared. No noise at all. There was no way, considering it disappeared in a blink, for it to have humanly moved that fast without making some kind of sound. The only way it could have disappeared as fast as if it would slam the door and shut behind it. I remember how terrified I was at that point and was looking to my mom to see if she saw it too, but when she didn't say anything, so I assumed I just hallucinated it for years. That was until a few years ago. I was telling my dad about that night, and he told me my mom had also seen it. But due to her mental health problems and me not saying anything to her or him about it, I hadn't said anything when I looked at her. He dismissed it as a hallucination. Nothing quite like that ever happened to me again, but that experience was the reason for years I couldn't sleep without a light on. Before that day, I was not afraid of the dark. I didn't believe in ghosts. Didn't even understand people who could actually die at that point, and was not really exposed to religion, not recently either. Every night after that instant until we moved, I was petrified to even sleep in my room. Hairsaw Matthew says, I've seen and heard a few. They aren't very creepy or anything. To me, they were. My dad woke me up once, shaking me awake and telling me to get up in a very urgent tone he rarely used. I didn't turn around to face him or anything. I just fell back to sleep, and after hearing heavy footsteps walk off. Later, I woke up in a panic thinking I had missed an appointment or something. He said he hadn't even left his room. The second time this happened, I woke up and felt like I was being watched. This time I opened my eyes and glanced over to the bathroom door, and my sibling was staring at me. Ooh, that's so creepy. They were slowly moved up over the bench, like weirdly slow. I sat up and I told them to go back to bed. That house was so creepy, and I know they wouldn't have head downstairs in the middle of the night no matter what. I offered to bring them back up, but they didn't seem to register anything I was saying. So they sat down, and it was pretty much a wordless staring contest. Eventually, they left in the same saunter, and I warily fell asleep and asked about it in the morning. Yep, never left their room upstairs. I barely slept while I lived in that house. It was always loud, and every night brought something different. Anytime I would sleep, I would be startled awake by something. The last one I can remember was my sister coming home. The front door opening and slamming, with her yelling up at us saying she was home before hearing her jog downstairs. She was supposed to be at work, so my mom and I exchanged glances. I went to go greet her. I looked everywhere. All the rooms were empty in the house, and the house was quiet. The door was never opened again, and everyone in the house at the time was upstairs. We messaged both her and my older sister, both of which were not home and never came home. I kind of wish I got to see what opened the door. Everyone in the house heard it, so that one I can confirm wasn't brought by sleep-deprived hallucinations. Weird stuff, really. The first two happened in my grandma's house, where one person passed away. The second was in our old home. That would be creepy. I mean, just hearing sounds in your room, in the house, you don't know where they're coming from. It's creepy. Colt says, I remember way back when I was still in high school. I was playing games on my computer when my mom opened the door, peeked her head in, and told me she was home for lunch, so I literally thought nothing of it. Only thing I felt was off was she was wearing a blue shirt, which I've never seen her wear before. But then again, I never really cared much about that sort of details to begin with. Anyways, an hour goes by, and my mom opens up the door, and she peeks her head in, and she tells me she just went on lunch and wanted to know if I wanted to get some of her fries. I told her I just seen her an hour ago, and that she told me she was on lunch, and how she was wearing a blue shirt, which she now is wearing a white shirt. She looked confused and told me she hasn't been home at all since leaving to work. And that was 1 p.m. when she usually takes lunch. I still don't know if it was a doppelganger or a spirit, or if I had a weird mental moment, but I never got a scared feeling or out-of-worldly presence of who I believed to be my mom. Could you imagine parents or a close friend coming in, know what they look like, only to realize it was never really them? I mean, that's creepy. That's really creepy. Tell me what you think. You know, do your research. Tell me in stories. Has anyone ever had doppelganger or mimic encounters of someone mimicking their voice or their parents' voice? Maybe we'll go over some videos on the internet. Thanks for staying. If you like it, come back and we'll see you again.